offer the presenter notes for Catch My Breath, Session 1, Designed for Addiction. Catch My Breath is a program about e-cigarettes and tobacco. It includes 4 35-minute sessions and peer group facilitated activities to help you identify the consequences of using e-cigarettes, understand the highly addictive nature of nicotine, learn strategies used by the tobacco industry to get teens addicted to nicotine and other products, co-create and participate in the conversation about tobacco and e-cigarette policies. CVS Health and the CVS Health Foundation started the Be Your Best campaign in hopes of fostering the first tobacco-free generation. Tobacco and nicotine products are divided into 4 categories. 1. Combustible tobacco, which includes cigarettes, cigars, hookah, cigarillos, roll your own. 2. Smokeless tobacco, which includes chew, snuff, and snus. 3. E-cigarettes, which includes disposable, tank, cartridge. 4. Heat not burn, which is heat sticks. What do all of these products have in common? The answer is nicotine. Although e-cigarettes are less harmful compared to other tobacco products like a combustible cigarette, they are still very harmful. Every form of tobacco products can cause harm to nearly every organ in your body. It can also lead to heart disease, stroke, eye problems, and yellow teeth. Each of these products we talked about come with their own issues. Combustible tobacco, for example, cigarettes, cigars, hookah, cigarillos, roll your own, can cause lung, mouth, stomach, kidney, and bladder cancers. E-cigarettes of all types, including Juul, contain nicotine, which is a highly addictive drug. Although e-cigarettes seem to be less harmful than combustible tobacco, the aerosol that users inhale have other harmful substances, including heavy metals, volatile organic compounds, and ultrafine particles that cause irreversible damage to the lungs. They also contain as much or more nicotine than a regular cigarette. Smokeless tobacco like chew, dip, and snuffs can cause cancer of the mouth, esophagus, and pancreas. Heat not burn, like IQOS sticks or Glow, are considered a harm reduction product. The long-term effects are not well known, but they contain a lower level of carcinogenic chemicals compared to a combustible tobacco. E-cigarettes are considered safer than cigarettes, but they're far from safe. They're a toxic mix of highly addictive nicotine and other chemicals like acetaldehyde, which causes mutations in reproductive cells, possibly causes genetic defects, and is a Class II carcinogen. Those cause cancer, and is a Class II specific target organ toxin. Acrolein may cause frequent lung infections and general deterioration of health due to an accumulation in one or many human organs. Not to mention other chemicals like 2,3-pentanediene, propylene glycol, heavy metals like lead, nickel, volatile organic compounds, and ultrafine particles which harm the lungs, and more than 8,000 flavor chemicals used in the different e-liquids have not been tested for use in the lungs. The chemical structure of nicotine consists of carbon, nitrogen, and hydrogen. Pathway to nicotine addiction. When you smoke a tobacco product, nicotine gets into the blood through the lungs, then travels to the brain where it hacks into the brain by pretending to be a natural brain chemical. It then activates the dopamine reward system, which is responsible for pleasure in the brain. Overstimulation of this pleasure causes the brain to lead to addiction. Consequences of nicotine include nicotine being very addictive, especially to the developing brain of teens, Nicotine users experience varying degrees of mood disorders, including anxiety, moodiness, and nervousness, as a sign of nicotine addiction and withdrawal. Nicotine causes harm to many organs in the body that includes the brain, lungs, heart, gastrointestinal tract, and joints. Here are some examples. In the ear, nose, and throat, you might experience congestion and dry mouth. The brain, you might experience addiction, mood change, headache, irritability, anxiety, depression, trouble sleeping, and dizziness. With the lungs, there may be shortness of breath, cough, throat irritation, COPD, which is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. In the heart, there might be hypertension, fast heartbeat, artery constriction, coronary artery disease. With the gut, there might be heartburn, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and indigestion. With hormones, there might be high insulin, which is low blood sugar, and insulin resistance, which leads to type 2 diabetes. Nicotine can cause a number of birth complications. The worst are stillbirth, which is when the baby is dead at birth, and sudden infant death syndrome, when the infant dies in its first few months. When a pregnant woman uses anything with nicotine in it, the nicotine also gets to the baby. Nicotine is extremely harmful to the developing fetus, and the harms increase as the baby grows. When pregnant moms use nicotine, it is more likely there will be significant problems. Nicotine-exposed babies tend to have several health problems throughout their lives, including impaired function of the endocrine, reproductive, respiratory, cardiovascular, and neurologic systems. Babies who are exposed to nicotine in utero tend to grow up to have poor long-term academic performance and behavioral problems such as ADHD, aggressive behaviors, and future substance abuse. Why do e-cigarette companies use such high amounts of nicotine? The higher the dose, the faster the nicotine gets to the brain, and the faster addiction occurs. Nicotine can be measured using two different units. The first is nicotine by weight, which is percent. The second is concentration, milligrams per milliliter, which is most commonly used. A few years ago, most e-cigarette brands contain between 3 milligrams per milliliter and 30 milligrams per milliliter, which is equivalent to 0.25 to 2.5% nicotine by weight. The 30 milligrams per milliliter was intended for heavy smokers. Today, the most popular brand, Juul, contains 59 milligrams per milliliter, or 5% by weight, of nicotine. This is a very high nicotine content. Note that 60 milligrams of nicotine can be deadly. 1 teaspoon of nicotine can be fatal to toddlers. Additionally, 20 milligrams per milliliter is the non-prescription maximum in Europe. This is indicated by the blue horizontal line on the graph. Do you want to become the next generation of smokers to replace those that have died? There is a high chance that this man started smoking as a teenager. Nearly all adults who smoke started when they were teenagers. Tobacco companies don't care about you. They just want you to give them your money. Teachers, please put the students in groups, and each group will have 2 tasks. Activity 1, Consequences of e-cigarette use. Distribute an index card or square of paper to each student. Explain you will be brainstorming consequences of e-cigarette use in your groups. One half of the group will list health consequences of using e-cigarettes. The other half of the group will list social consequences of using e-cigarettes. For example, consequences related to social situation, family, personal identity, and goals. There are no wrong answers. In a moment, you will pause the video to do the activity. Resume the video after the students have written their answers. When the students have had 5 minutes to write down their consequences, share out at least one example from each group on the kind of consequences for both health and social. Please pause the video for the activity.